Live video feels close. It feels like a friend in your room, a voice that answers back, a life unfolding in real time. That immediacy is what makes live streams so compelling, and what makes them dangerous. There is no editor. There is no pause button. Once a broadcast begins, anything can happen, and sometimes the worst thing does. This video tells 5 stories of influencers who lost their lives while live streaming. Each case is unique, unfolding in different countries and under different circumstances, yet they all reveal the same disturbing truth. The very technology designed to connect us can, under the wrong conditions, broadcast our final moments. The goal here is not spectacle. It's remembrance, context, and an honest examination of what happens when performance collides with reality in front of a digital crowd. It begins in a kitchen at altitude. The air is thin and bright in the Aba Tibetan and Qiang Autonomous Prefecture of Sichuan, China. This remote region is known for its snow-capped peaks, its winding rivers, and its rural traditions that have changed little over centuries. In this setting, a woman named Lhamo became an unlikely star. Lhamo was in her early 30s, a mother of 2, and a daughter of farmers. She didn't fit the polished, makeup-heavy mold of many internet personalities. Instead, she leaned into simplicity. Her Douyin account, the Chinese counterpart to TikTok, was filled with scenes of her cooking over open fires, foraging herbs in the forest, and singing Tibetan folk songs in her clear, unadorned voice. She wore traditional dress, rarely used filters, and almost never applied cosmetics on camera. Her naturalness stood out in a world of curated perfection. Viewers adored her. By 2020, she had gathered nearly 800,000 followers and millions of likes. To many, her videos were a balm, gentle windows into a life rooted in the land, far removed from the noise of cities. She symbolized authenticity at a time when authenticity felt rare. But behind the soothing clips was a more troubling reality. Lhamo had married a man named Tang, but the relationship was marred by violence. In June 2020, she divorced him after years of alleged mistreatment. In theory, this should have been a step towards safety and freedom. In practice, it was not. Tang refused to let her go. He stalked, harassed, and demanded reconciliation. Family members later recounted how Lhamo lived with constant fear that he would retaliate. She sought help from local authorities, but her complaints were often dismissed as family disputes. That phrase, common in rural China, meant officials were reluctant to intervene. For women like Lhamo, the law offered little shield. On September 14, 2020, Lhamo uploaded what would be her last pre-recorded video, a simple clip of her singing a Tibetan song. Later that day, she began a live stream from her kitchen. At first, it looked like any other. The camera showed her home, her face, the familiar backdrop of rural life. Thousands tuned in. Then, suddenly, the screen went black. At first, viewers assumed it was a technical glitch, poor connection maybe, but the audio continued. What came through the speakers was chaos. Shouting, crashing, Lhamo's cries. Tang had entered her home carrying a bucket of gasoline. Before she could stop him, he doused her in the liquid and set her on fire. Viewers couldn't see what was happening, but they could hear it. Helpless, they flooded the comments, begging someone to intervene. Neighbors rushed to her aid, smothering the flames and calling emergency services. Lhamo was taken to a hospital with burns covering 90% of her body. She survived for 2 agonizing weeks, enduring surgeries and unbearable pain, before succumbing on September 30th. The news spread quickly across China. Followers were devastated. Many donated money to help cover her medical expenses, though it was ultimately too late. On social media, her death became a lightning rod for conversations about domestic violence. Hashtags demanding justice circulated widely, though many posts were censored by government authorities wary of mass outrage. Activists pointed out that China had only criminalized domestic violence in 2016, and even then, the law had loopholes. It didn't cover unmarried couples, same-sex partners, or certain types of abuse. Police often hesitated to intervene, especially in rural communities where patriarchal traditions held sway. Critics argued that women like Lhamo were systematically unprotected by both law and culture. Tang was arrested within days. In October 2021, he was convicted of intentional homicide and sentenced to death. The court described his actions as extremely cruel and noted the significant public impact of the case. For many, the severity of the punishment felt like a symbolic acknowledgement of the collective grief and fury sparked by Lhamo's murder. Even after her death, Lhamo's videos remained online. Her Douyin page became a virtual shrine where followers posted tributes, shared her songs, and expressed sorrow. Clips of her foraging in the mountains or laughing while cooking went viral again, this time as memorials. Her death also sparked tangible reforms. In some regions, local governments began experimenting with databases that allowed women to check whether potential partners had histories of abuse. Activists called for stronger protective orders and better enforcement. Lhamo's story illustrates how live streaming can inadvertently capture and expose private horrors to a public stage. Her viewers didn't just witness a performance, they witnessed the collapse of her safety in real time. She wanted to share the beauty of her life in the mountains. Instead, her final live stream became a reckoning for an entire country. On August 31st, 2020, the world witnessed one of the most disturbing live stream tragedies ever recorded. Ronnie McNutt, a 33-year-old man from Mississippi, went live on Facebook from his home. By the end of that broadcast, thousands of strangers had seen something no one should ever have to watch: his final moments. Ronnie wasn't a celebrity chasing fame or money through his live streams. Friends described him as a warm, funny, and kind soul with a big heart. He had served in the U.S. Army Reserve and was a veteran of the Iraq War, where he carried experiences that weighed heavily on him long after his service ended. Outside of his military past, Ronnie was active in his local church community and held a steady job at a Toyota plant. Beneath the humor and community work, however, he struggled with depression and post-traumatic stress. He had recently gone through a painful breakup, and those close to him worried about his mental state in the weeks leading up to the live stream. On that late August night, Ronnie pressed the Go Live button on Facebook. At first, the stream looked like countless others, just a man sitting in his room, speaking into his phone. But to those who knew him, it was immediately clear that something was wrong. His tone was heavy. His words carried despair. As the minutes passed, viewers began to realize that this wasn't just venting or a sad story being shared online. Ronnie was in crisis. Friends watching live desperately tried to intervene. They called him directly. They flooded the comments with pleas for him to stop. Some even contacted local police, begging them to reach his home in time. Despite their efforts, the situation spiraled. The live audience watched in horror as Ronnie died by suicide on camera. The broadcast was removed from Facebook afterward, but in the age of digital sharing, removal did not mean disappearance. Clips began to circulate almost instantly on other platforms. Some users re-uploaded the footage to TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Others edited it into memes or spliced it into unrelated videos to shock unsuspecting viewers. Parents reported that their children, scrolling through harmless dance clips, were suddenly confronted with the horrific video without warning. Moderators scrambled to take the content down, but it spread faster than platforms could react. Within days, Ronnie's death had become an international story, not only because of the tragedy itself, but because of how uncontrollably it spread online. This raised an urgent question. If platforms could detect and mute copyrighted music within seconds, why couldn't they stop the rapid spread of a video of someone dying? For Ronnie's family and friends, the aftermath was devastating. Not only had they lost someone they loved, but his final moments were being replayed endlessly by strangers across the globe. They couldn't mourn privately. Instead, their grief was magnified by the internet's inability or unwillingness to contain the damage. More than 3 years later, Ronnie's story is still remembered, not just for the horror of what happened, but for the conversations it sparked. Platforms have since experimented with more aggressive moderation, quicker reporting tools, and crisis intervention features. Ronnie's live stream didn't just expose flaws in Facebook's systems, it forced a conversation about the nature of real-time content itself. Can live streams ever be made safe? Is it possible to balance the appeal of immediacy with the responsibility to protect lives? His case remains one of the most chilling examples of the dangers of unfiltered digital immediacy. In the summer of 2025, France was shaken by a live-streaming tragedy that revealed the darkest side of digital entertainment. The death did not occur on a battlefield or in a crime scene, but in a cramped apartment where a man had built his notoriety by turning humiliation and harm into a show. Trash streaming wasn't invented in France, but in the early 2020s, it spread rapidly across Europe. The format thrived on chaos. Hosts invited participants, often people struggling with poverty, addiction, or social isolation, to perform degrading or reckless acts in exchange for donations. The live chat egged them on, paying real money to push the spectacle further. In France, one streamer in particular became notorious for his extreme broadcasts. Middle-aged, outspoken, and reckless, he positioned himself not just as a host, but as the central figure, the man who would endure whatever came his way for the sake of the show. By mid-2025, the streamer had developed a loyal following. On one hot July weekend, he began what he advertised as a marathon live stream, a broadcast that would run without pause for days. Fans would send in dares, and he would perform them live. At first, it looked like a party, but as the hours turned into days, the tone shifted. The dares grew harsher. The physical toll became obvious. By the third day, he was visibly exhausted. His body swayed, his eyes drooped, his voice slurred. Still, the donations kept coming. Late that evening, the stream reached its breaking point. The man suddenly collapsed and did not rise again. At first, the audience thought it was part of the act. For several long minutes, donations continued to pour in, the counter ticking higher even as he lay motionless. Emergency services were eventually called, but by the time paramedics arrived, it was too late. The streamer was pronounced dead. His marathon broadcast had become a public record of his final hours, a slow decline into fatal exhaustion and intoxication, all under the relentless gaze of the internet. News of the death spread quickly through French media. Prosecutors opened an inquiry into whether the platform that had hosted the stream bore responsibility. Activists argued that the structure of trash streaming was exploitative by design. It targeted vulnerable individuals, dangled money in front of them, and encouraged unsafe behaviors. For viewers, the French trash streamer's death was a brutal reminder of how entertainment can cross the line into exploitation. For platforms, it was a warning shot that profit cannot justify negligence. For regulators, it was an urgent case study in how digital culture evolves faster than laws. Among the 5 shocking influencer deaths, this case is unique because it wasn't a single tragic mistake or a private crisis. It was a system functioning exactly as designed. The streamer died not because the camera slipped or because of one reckless act, but because the very structure of the show rewarded escalation until his body gave out. In May 2023, a Chinese influencer known as San Qiange, literally Brother 3000, joined a live stream competition on Douyin. The format was called a PK, short for player kill, a digital duel where 2 streamers compete for gifts and points from viewers. Whoever receives the most wins. Whoever loses faces a penalty. That night, the penalty was drinking. Viewers demanded it, and the contestants accepted. What began as a casual match quickly escalated. San Qiange downed bottle after bottle of high-proof alcohol as the chat cheered him on. His rival's audience egged him further, determined to see him lose. The PK format was designed for pressure. A countdown clock ticked down in the corner of the screen. The audience's money became fuel for humiliation. The more they donated, the more the contestants drank. Hours later, San Qiange was dead. Reports confirmed that he died of alcohol poisoning not long after the broadcast ended. His death triggered outrage across Chinese social media. Many had assumed that Douyin's moderation systems would prevent such dangerous content from continuing unchecked. But in reality, the algorithm that should have stopped the drinking competition instead amplified it, drawing more viewers and more donations. For critics, San Qiange's death highlighted the toxic incentives built into livestream features. If a platform rewards escalation, then escalation is inevitable. The tragedy was not just about one man's choice to drink. It was about a system that turned his suffering into entertainment, that monetized his destruction. Authorities responded by tightening rules on PK battles and imposing stricter penalties for dangerous content. But for Sankianja's followers, the reforms came too late. His death had already shown, in the starkest possible way, what happens when human limits are turned into digital currency. In the United States in 2024, a teenage rapper was on the verge of building a career. Known for his energy and ambition, he had built a small but loyal following on Instagram and Spotify. His live streams were a mix of casual chats, freestyle performances, and the swagger typical of young artists trying to stand out. On one summer night, he went live from his bedroom. Music played faintly in the background. Fans tuned in expecting jokes, verses, maybe glimpses of new material. Instead, they watched in horror as a firearm entered the frame. The gun, outfitted with a laser sight and flashlight, had been used before in his videos as a prop, but this time, it wasn't unloaded. He pointed it at himself in a moment of reckless bravado. He pulled the trigger. The live stream ended abruptly. Viewers initially thought it was staged, a dark stunt, but emergency responders confirmed the unthinkable. The shot was real. The teenager was rushed to a hospital, but could not be saved. His death devastated his family and friends. His mother, who had raised him alone, spoke through tears about her only child, her pride and her heartbreak. His schoolmates released balloons in his memory. His music, tracks that showed both raw talent and youthful ambition, was played at memorials, bittersweet reminders of a life cut short. Beyond grief, the tragedy sparked debates about gun safety, youth culture, and the influence of social media. Why was a loaded firearm accessible to a teenager? Why had livestream culture normalized treating deadly weapons as props? His case underscored the way performance can blur into peril when the audience demands authenticity and the performer feels pressured to deliver. His life should have been remembered for his music, his laughter, his dreams. Instead, it became a case study in how quickly a moment of carelessness, magnified by a camera, can become irreversible. Between these stories runs a simple thread. The camera collapses the distance between performance and reality, and the audience collapses the distance between witness and participant. In a quiet kitchen, a young woman's attempt to move on from abuse became a national reckoning. In Mississippi, a veteran's despair turned into an unstoppable viral clip. In France, a man's pursuit of attention ended in exploitation by design. In China, a digital duel transformed into a death sentence. In America, a teenager's bravado with a weapon turned fatal in seconds. Each of these cases reveals something unsettling about live streaming: its intimacy, its immediacy, its lack of safety nets. A live stream can connect us in moments of joy and solidarity, but it can just as easily turn tragedy into content, suffering into spectacle.